So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Kate Hoey calling Northern Ireland a colony and comparing MLAs who just want to go back into Stormont as kind of Nazi collaborators in Vichy France. This is probably one of the most unhinged Brexit speeches I've heard in a long time.
Leading politicians who say, and it's true, that Northern Ireland has now actually become a form of colony, the EU's first kind of colony. And if Stormont goes back with this present Windsor framework, they in fact would be almost like what...
before she comes out with more nonsense, Northern Ireland is in effect a colony in the sense of it's an occupied part of another country. So for her to use this comparison, especially in the context of Northern Ireland, makes absolutely no sense. That in itself, I think is quite maddening, but also the fact that it's not a colony. It's just in the single market for goods. That's all it's. They're the only EU rules it has to adhere to. It's just stuff for goods. Honestly, it's just so dumb. It's so dumb. Stormont still exists. They can still pass laws. It's just what she's saying is so stupid.
Happened during the war with the Vichy government, where all those MLAs would be collaborators with a kind of colonial government, taking foreign laws from a foreign legislature governing much of our economy in Northern Ireland and keeping us in a foreign customs code, whereby GB, Great Britain, our country, where our capital is, becomes a third country, becomes our foreign country.
Yes, it's very similar to Nazi-occupied France. Because the only difference is the only things the Nazis did in France was change their custom codes. Are you stupid, lady? Are you just, how thick are you? Honestly,
it's just not acceptable. Article 164 says in the withdrawal agreement that we could change everything about the protocol except the essential elements. And that is precisely what's happened. Nothing fundamental has changed. And I think the one thing that we probably all could agree in your Lordship's House on this is that the European Union got exactly what it wanted from the negotiations. It held out for a long time. Remember, we were all told, no, we can never open it up, we can never discuss it again. Held out for a long time. No.
It's not really what the EU said. They said there'll be no renegotiation, but they did say they would do tweaks. They even did it in the same year that the Northern Ireland Protocol was implemented. I believe it was October 2021. There were the October proposals. So for her to argue, they said they can never be changed, all this nonsense, like what she's saying is gibberish. They said they wouldn't renegotiate it, but they would tweak some things if need be, depending on the UK's cooperation. And lo and behold, once we gave the live access to the EU, which is what they wanted from the start, things started moving in the right direction.
No renegotiation. Then it recognised the need to look like it was reacting to some of the real problems that even the most fanatical supporters of the EU saw were causing difficulties. And then it secured this on a very favourable terms, retaining a huge say over what happens in a part of a sovereign nation that, having left, is not meant to be subject to its own rules. So I would say to your Lordship's House, I know that we talked about elections coming in Northern Ireland, but there's obviously elections coming here, and I know that there's a great feeling of wanting everybody to be united. But I just would end by quoting from one very senior Conservative in the other place who didn't vote for it. And he sent me a text to say why he wasn't voting for it. He didn't vote against it because he's loyal to his party, but he said, I will not be...
Yeah, this thing was so bad that he didn't vote against it, but what you're arguing here is, surely he would be a collaborator as well then, because he's not voting to end this quote madness, this kind of nonsense that you're talking about. Surely he would be one of the collaborators then, because he stood by and did nothing under your really bad analogy.
Voting for this framework, I decided that this was one vote where I don't want judgment of history against me. That's what I hope your noble lordships are thinking.
I mean, that's a really inflated ego there. I don't want the burden of history or whatever to look upon me. That's just absolute baloney. He's just a coward. It's just a coward who didn't want to vote against it because they didn't want to suffer the ire of the party, and didn't want to vote for it because they maybe didn't want to suffer the ire of the voters, or in their heart of hearts felt like the Windsor framework or whatever was wrong. but was too cowardly to basically say it openly. That's who this person is, because they would have gone public. They would have gone public with why they abstained or why they voted against it. I think it's cowardice. But her comparisons to Vichy France and Northern Ireland, like Northern Ireland is a colony, but not of the EU. It's a British colony. You can argue. It's something that that we kept from from when Ireland was a colony. Back in the early 1900s. But this is probably the most unhinged thing we're going to see all year. At least I hope it is, because I don't see how they can go much further than this. It's actually quite terrifying, to be honest with you. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. How this lady was ever a Labour MP is beyond me. And hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.